welcome to this HEIF Policies and Priorities information session with the Knowledge Exchange team from Research England. Obviously, this is a significant briefing for our audience, and we are recording this webinar so that you can watch it back afterwards if you need to, and equally anybody who hasn't been able to join today will be able to watch it back, so you will get an email about that afterwards and the slides will be available for you. So this event follows the publication of the HEIF Policies and Priorities document, which I'm sure you've all been looking through, and our speakers are going to take us through those priorities reflected in the document and introduce the changes to the HEIF accountability statements, explaining some of the background to those changes and the context as to why there have been changes. They will provide some worked examples and there will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. Please try and use the Q&A for questions if you can remember to. This gives us both the opportunity to kind of see what themes of questions we're getting, but it also enables you to it enables us to respond to questions in real time where we can. So our speakers here today, we have Simon Hepworth, who's Director of Knowledge Exchange at Research England. We have Rhys Perry, who's Head of Data and Evidence at Research England. We have Ellen Bamford, who's Associate Director of Knowledge Exchange and Evidence at Research England. We have Sasha Ayres, who's a Senior Policy Advisor at Research England, and Bridget Azubike, who's also a Senior Policy Advisor at Research England. I'm going to turn to Simon for just a few words, and then we'll start the slideshow and take you through the main body of the presentation. Simon.
Thank you, Tamsin. Welcome to everybody. Great to see you all here on this webinar on the evolving policies and priorities of our Higher Education Innovation Fund. As many of you know, HEIF continues to be a cornerstone of support for knowledge exchange across the sector, enabling universities to work with business, communities and public services to deliver real economic and societal benefit. Each year, we work closely with our sponsoring government departments, with DSIT and with Department for Education, to inform them of the value that you bring to society and the economy through your HEIF-funded work. And we also listen to the emerging government priorities from DSIT and Department for Education and what they want us to deliver on. Through your underpinning work and through this engagement, we have collectively achieved continued high confidence in HEIF from government, and we are building on this. So today's session is about change and opportunity. To retain the high confidence, we are shifting HEIF towards a more outcomes-focused model. This means moving beyond inputs and activities to better understand and evidence the outputs and the longer-term outcomes that HEIF-funded work delivers, particularly those that contribute to economic growth. Today, we'll explore how the new accountability statements and annual monitoring processes are designed to help institutions articulate their strategic objectives, to track progress, and to demonstrate impact. We'll also look at the introduction of the Knowledge Exchange Logic Model, which provides a structured framework to link HEIF-supported activities to tangible outcomes, whether that's commercialisation, skills development, spin-outs, or regional competitiveness. This is not just about compliance, it's about clarity, strategy, and telling our story better. It's about showing how your institution's unique strengths are being leveraged to drive growth and how HEIF is enabling that journey. We hope today's sessions will help you navigate these changes with confidence, and we look forward to your questions and insights throughout the hour. And with that, let's get started, and I'm going to hand over to Rhys.
Thanks, Simon, for that introduction. I think Bridget's just going to get the slides shared, but whilst we wait, I'll just say thank you as well to KE UK for hosting this session. Bridget, if we can move to the agenda slide, I'll just have a quick run through of what's going to be covered today. So I will just mention that the slides will be shared after the session. We have a lot to get through, so at some points we may have to move quickly and gloss across the detail on the slides, but you will receive all the information afterwards, and we'll make sure we're drawing out the key points. So yeah, we'll start with providing some background information to set the context for the accountability statements, covering key key government priorities for HEIF and how the policies and priorities have been developed to deliver the economic growth mission. But the main focus of the session will then be on running through changes to the policies and priorities and the practical changes made to how we collect information through the accountability statements, the reasons behind this new structure, and presenting you with some worked examples. The key aim of today's session also, as mentioned, is to provide the opportunity for the team to respond to questions about the accountability statements. So just to stress, please post these through the Q&A function where possible. We're aiming to leave around 20 minutes at the end of the session for answering your questions. I'll now pass to Ellen to run through the kind of scene setting elements.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Reese. So we thought helpful before we move into the meat of the session and talking about the changes to accountability approach, it's particularly important to talk through what some of the sort of surrounding context is for the wider review of HEIF that we've launched in the last couple of weeks, and what some of the drivers are for these changes that we want to make. So although the review itself was launched formally last week, there's been a huge amount of work, particularly in the last 6 months within our team at Research England to support this first phase of the review that sits behind the approach that the team are going to talk through today. A key point that we do want to emphasise, and as Simon spoke to as well, is that we are starting from a point of a strong foundation of evidence and policy development. We see ourselves as standing on a solid base of evidence for the economic value that HEIF already achieved, for the way it achieved, so and therefore we want to build on the strengths and successes that we've already seen. So for us, it's not about reform and sort of tearing up the song sheet, but it's about building on success and really strengthening the positive attributes that we already know HEIF to have and driving that forward through a more focused approach. Bridget, can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So for context, for what the overarching aim of the review of HEIF is, that this accountability approach is the first phase of, is to increase the focus and effectiveness of our delivery of government priorities through HEIF, namely at the moment that is a really strategic focus on delivering and kickstarting economic growth. As you can see here, there's sort of 4 intended benefits and outcomes that we want to achieve through this review, which are set out in our circular letter that we issued a couple of weeks ago, but it covers a real breadth of ambition for us, including aligning use of HEIF with government priorities, looking at the formula itself and the formula being improved from a policy perspective to increase its clarity and agility in responding to emerging priorities. There's a practical lens for us as well in terms of improving the way in which the formula operates, given that since its current design was initiated as a formula fund in 2008, we haven't made significant change to the formula. We see this as a really opportune moment to really improve the practical elements of our formula mechanism as well. And then finally, as an underpinning approach to all of our work at Research England, we want to enhance the data and evidence that we use to underpin our approach as well. Next slide, please, Bridget. So what's the kind of context that we're asking you to consider when thinking about your plans for HEIF, but also that's driving our thinking when setting out this review process? For HEIF, the government priorities that we think about are driven, as Simon said, by both DSIT and the DFE. And particularly in the recent months, we've seen increasing clarity from government on what these are for the next few years. And for HEIF, this has allowed us to update the government priorities that apply to HEIF for the next spend period. And we see these as very much being 3 kind of pillars that should be guiding your HEIF use and our thinking as well. So there's the sort of broad plan for change that the government has set out, where clearly the economic growth mission is where our focus lies. There's the modern and industrial strategy, where HEIF is named as a key intervention important in delivering this wider R&D strategy, and then really narrowing down to higher education. The post-16 education and skills white paper published in the last few weeks also indicates HEIF as a key delivery mechanism for the priorities set out in this paper. Bridget, if you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. And so I do want to spend just a moment talking about the white paper before we move on to the broader HEIF policies and priorities document. As many of you will have seen, the skills white paper was published a couple of weeks ago and sets out a really clear intention to review HEIF with a specific aim to increase delivery of the government's economic growth mission. And therefore we see this as kind of being our new North Star for HEIF, for both how we design the programme and then also for how HEIF should be used by yourself as well in your plans. However, the paper is also clear that we should also, and similarly in your use of HEIF, be considering approaches to specialisation and collaboration, and this should be of priority too, which is what we set out in our policies and priorities document as well. And so this is where, in making your HEIF plans and considering your areas of strategic approaches to your knowledge exchange, we are expecting you to consider and set out what your areas of strength are as an institution and how you're building on those in your plans for HEIF to really maximise the outcomes you seek to achieve in delivering the overarching economic growth ambition. So in considering your knowledge exchange in the context of your research and teaching strengths, your place, your mission as an institution, and therefore how you fit into either the local or national system, and therefore where you can be most effective in your knowledge exchange to deliver those impacts and desired economic growth outcomes. So we said we'd try and be quite brief to get into the meat of the session, so I'll now hand over to Rhys to give a little bit more detail on how we're implementing the review and the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, so we're now going to focus on kind of what implementation of these priorities into HEIF actually looks like in practice. So the team at Research England reviewed the programme and identified 2 mechanisms for adjusting the focus of HEIF, which are being addressed sequentially. So initially, in phase 1 here, we've updated the priorities for HEIF and adjusted the information collected from HEIF recipients to be more outcomes focused. This will give us increased clarity and therefore quality of evidence to demonstrate how HEIF achieves economic growth outcomes. Moving on to phase 2, significant work will now be started to review the funding formula, looking to develop the formula architecture to have clearer and greater incentivisation of KE performance that aligns to intended policy outcomes, and removing the practical clunkiness and complexity of the current formula that is legacy kind of from having certain add-ons over time and no kind of major change since its launch. We're aiming for implementation of the adjusted formula no sooner than 2027-28 allocation year. We'll certainly be looking to kind of engage the sector on work to develop the formula, but focus of today's session is on the phase 1 elements, so we'll be talking about those in a lot more detail now over the next few slides. Next slide, please. So yeah, we're now going to focus on the recently published policies and priorities and bring out the key new elements that we want to draw everybody's attention to. So the policies and priorities for HEIF are set periodically, typically around 5-year intervals, to ensure that HEIF is effectively reflecting changes in the higher education ecosystem. It provides guidance for how HEIF should be used to deliver its intended policy objectives, including what types of spending is eligible. And the policies and priorities essentially set the basis for higher education providers to set their long-term strategies for knowledge exchange and how they will use HEIF funding to achieve those. It also provides assurance that public funds will be spent suitably, whilst also leaving flexibility for local decision making over the assurance period. To complement these kind of forward-looking accountability statements, we also collect more backwards-looking annual monitoring statements, which provide the evidence of successes that have been achieved. Next slide. Yep. So, as mentioned, the team at ROE have reviewed kind of previous policies and priorities for HEIF, along with our approach to accountability. And essentially, the material being presented today is the outcome of this review work. So key changes to the policies and priorities that were published on the 29th of October include articulation of new government, Research England and OFS priorities. Significantly, this includes the focus of HEIF towards delivering economic growth, and as mentioned by Ellen, encouraging consideration of wider priorities set out in the Industrial Strategy and Skills White Paper to guide use of HEIF. We're also encouraging greater emphasis on maximising institutional strengths and specialisms. Our definition of economic growth is broad, and we want to highlight that there's lots of ways and lots of ways and pathways to achieving such outcomes, and we want to make sure that institutions are kind of focusing on their role in the wider picture. To this end, there's a section of advice from the UCI Commercialisation and Innovation Policy team at Cambridge, presenting a framework for university contributions to economic growth that are relevant to HEIF use, which we'll talk through in more detail. In addition, there's the new accountability statement that we'll run through in more detail, and this includes a new requirement to provide detail around EDI considerations in your knowledge exchange activity, responding to an action set out in Research England's EDI action plan. Finally, the Policies and Priorities publication also provides greater detail and clarity on what HEIF funding can be used for. So hopefully this will kind of make it easier to interpret and understand kind of what eligible use of costs are. I'll now pass to Bridget, who's going to run us through the framework developed by UCI to show how universities can deliver the economic growth mission in various ways.
Thanks, Rhys. So to support HEIFs in finding the most appropriate pathway, we commissioned UCI to set out various ways different forms of KE can contribute to economic growth. As you see on the screen, this slide talks about these different pathways, and this full report was published on the same day as the P&P document on this link on the slide here. So what we hope is that the diagram is helpful to show the broad definitional approach we are taking to growth, and therefore the diversity of KE pathways that we recognize can be taken to achieve this objective. Basically, across the private, public, and third sector partnerships, these activities with economic impact may be immediate or direct outcomes where the route to impact is more indirect and will take longer to achieve, but their KE provides important grounding steps. So we expect that universities can look at the different pathways and the strengths within their institutions to be able to link to these different sectors, both national, local, to be able to contribute to economic growth. So we hope that this slide just helps provide that mental picture of how your institution's strength and specialization contributes to economic growth. And moving on from there, we've been able to draw out some key contributions that universities can look into. So some examples of KE activities that fit across this, they can fit into one or they can spread across all of them. These different pathways, we believe they do not operate in isolations, and all of them are important to achieving the others. So for example, if we look at making places and sectors thrive, particularly it is crucial to the university's roles of the convening roles that universities have, and they help towns, cities, and regions attract investments. So they are like catalysts to improving public sectors, building communities, shaping national policies, and supporting local leadership. So we believe that all of these different contributions of universities contribute to economic growth, and they all work together. And so universities can look at the different ways in which their strengths and their capabilities contribute to economic growth in these ways. So turning to the accountability statements, the current year, 25-26, is a transition year between two full accountability statement periods. So this year, the HEIF AMS, the annual monitoring statements, will ask a single question. If you're still using your HEIF as you set out in 2021 accountability statements, then you just need to tick a box to say so and move on. Also, if you've told us about the changes we are planning to make when we asked in April, it's the same process, just tick the box to say so and move on. However, if you've made further changes, then please provide some brief information to say what these are. And then we can then move to the next accountability statements, which are due in April 2026. Why we are taking this approach, we are building on solid foundations like Ellen mentioned earlier, and we hope that these are more structured outcome-based templates for you to use in your statement, and that strengthen the quality and clarity of our evidence, which help us to also demonstrate the clear links between your institution's objectives and the HEIF activities that you support with the intended economic growth outcomes that we are seeking to achieve. We also hope that this can help maximize institutions' strengths to contribute to economic growth through knowledge exchange. And also, we believe that this new approach will improve the understanding of the data you use in your institutions to monitor your activities and outcomes, and it will also support our long-term metrics development. So this new approach is based on our new program theory, which is the logic model I'll be talking to briefly next. So I know the slide on the screen is really tiny and it might be difficult to see, but the focus here is really that this shows that there are different pathways through which HEIF can deliver value. This diagram was produced as part of our major evaluation, and it provides a novel approach to evidencing the different ways HEIF delivers value, specifically against previous government priorities. So the details in the diagram is not necessarily the focus, but we are highlighting that there are diversity of number of pathways to which we can achieve the desired value. And that is the key underpinning principle of HEIF that we will be preserving in this review. There is a lot of diversity, there is flexibility for institutions to look at their strengths and their capabilities to be able to contribute to the impact of economic growth. So this is what this diagram shows. And the institutions are most effectively able to do this based on their strengths, local context, and their partner needs. So all of these things are what institutions should be looking at, the best route for them based on their own specific circumstances. So this is essentially a logic model that moves from input to impact. And Sasha will be talking more about it and how this links to our accountability statements.
Great, thanks very much, Bridget. So yes, there was a lot going on in that, the full program theory. So what we've tried to do is kind of simplify that. So on the left, we've got a simplified, what are the core elements of that KE logic model. And then this shows how it maps, we've mapped the new structure of the accountability statement to that. So you can kind of see the journey that we're going through. So onto the next slide, please, Bridget. Oh, we missed one.
Transition.
Oh, right.
It's
Okay, sorry.
4 seconds.
Sorry. No. Right. So I will take you through some worked examples now. On to the, and now it hasn't transitioned. On to the next slide now, please, Bridget. So this is super rehearsed. Right, this slide. Firstly, I'd like to thank anyone out there who gave up your valuable time to provide some feedback on this new structure. You know, we really value the engagement, and I hope you will recognise some changes, improvements as we take you through it to what some of you have seen previously. So this slide lays out the 5 sections of the overall statement. One thing I want to technical points, we've issued with you with an offline Word version of the content while we just finalize the online version. The structure is in a slightly different order on the online version. Sections 1, 2 and 4, which at the institutional level will be grouped together online with section 3 following. But the content is identical, it's only the order. And one other thing I really want to point out is that bear in mind, this is one template that needs to serve the purposes of 115 very different organisations who are reporting against HEIF allocations that range from 250,000 to over 6 million. So we set word limits, but they are maximums. We expect to see a great deal of variation in the responses received according to the scale of an institution, the scale of HEIF allocation, and of course the relative strategic importance of the different areas you're discussing. Next slide, please. So I'm going to work through each section in turn. Section 1, provide an institutional level overview that explains how your strategic objectives for KE align with your broader mission, goals, or other relevant frameworks. So what makes you special? This is your introduction to who you are and what you do and why you are that kind of institution. This question is intentionally broad because we want you to tell us whatever you think is most relevant to what drives your KE activity. In this way, it's very similar to the KEIF institutional context. And if that statement contains everything you want to say here, feel free to repeat it if it's fully relevant or extracts. You don't need to reinvent the wheel if it already fits. Next slide, please. Section 2. This is a new area, as Reese mentioned, to the accountability statements. Outline your institution's approach to ensuring your KE activities are inclusive. How do you prevent barriers to participation in KE? This initial question is high level. we're looking for assurance that as an institution, you've thought about EDI in the context of KE, and we'd like to know what your thoughts are. If you've got an institutional EDI strategy that encompasses everything you do, including your knowledge exchange, then that's fine to provide a summary of that here. There's no requirement to draft a particular specialised document to address this question if it already exists in some form elsewhere. There will be there are optional questions later to provide further detail in relation to specific activities. But this is the mandatory element, and I'll talk more about those later. Just want to reassure as well, we're not assessing your EDI processes. We just want to know that they exist and what they are. Next slide. So slide 3. So this is really the core section of the return. This is where we're looking for you to tell your story. What's your pathway to economic growth through your particular strengths and specialisms? You can please, this area is repeatable. So at the bottom of the online page, there'll be a button saying add new page, which will just give you another copy. So you can repeat it up to a maximum of 25 times. This is a technical limit, but we've looked at the previous accountability statements and we believe this should be more than sufficient. But if you do find it problematic in any way, do please come talk to us. So again, just say this is one structure trying to fit all. Please complete it in a way that best works for you and what you're doing. We know from previous statements there will often be multiple activity areas that speak to a single objective. So feel free to submit an individual page with the same objective across the top, but outlining different activities that speak to achieving that objective. Or feel free to cross-refer or repeat, whichever works best for you. And again, just to repeat, while we expect the basic information we're asking to be provided, the level of detail, really expect variety depending on the scale of view and its relative importance. So we're getting towards the worked examples now. I'm going to run through, I've picked kind of 2 fictional different types of activity. But I would also like to point out that while they are fictional, I did start with the previous accountability statement and I fictionalized names and expanded the information of the new areas, the EDI and the focus on outcomes. But the core information about the strategic objective, activity areas supported, intended outcomes, and success indicator targets, they were all included in the original submissions that I've based this on. So please, this is an evolved structure. It's not looking for you to start from scratch. And where many of you will have continuing activities, I hope you will find that this information already exists. And we're just asking you to kind of build on it and demonstrate your pathway to growth through it. In the following slides, I'm sorry, I apologise now, there's going to be a lot of text on the screen. I'm not expecting you to read it all while I'm talking, and I won't be just sitting here reading it all out to you either. The slides will be available afterwards for you to refer back to, because just aware that a lot of you will kind of want to see it written down. So I will speak to the slides, but I will speak in kind of general concepts of the different areas. So our first one, this is a research intensive university, and this is a really significant area of HEIF investment for them. So for this example, it's quite a lot of detail provided because it's really important. In the first area, they've just set out their strategic objective. And in this example, this provider is looking to strengthen regional prosperity by deepening local partnerships, but with a specific focus on co-creation and licensing of IP. And then in the next box, they've gone on to set out the activities that HEIF will be used to support and the outputs be achieved. So this provider, in this example, has a range of external and internal facing activity areas that combine to support the objective. Again, I can't say this strongly enough. We don't want to, it's always the worry with worked examples. We don't want to dictate how you need to to fill this in. This is one example of what it could look like, but providing you're leaving us with an overall understanding of what you're doing, what HEIF is paying for, and what the expected outputs are, then any kind of way of setting that out is fine. The online form will accept tables. Where HEIF is being used to alongside other funding streams, it can be really helpful for you to be clear about how they relate for each other. So in this example, the first K activity is launching an IP Connect platform. Another source of funding is paying for that platform to be built, but HEIF is supporting the staff resource to launch and use it. So that's stated how HEIF is interacting with another fund. Similarly, an indication of timescales might be a helpful way for you to present your output. So at the bottom of this table, this HEP has set out the expected outputs by the year, but that they expect them. And then at the bottom, we've got a brief overview of what staff resource is being supported. Next slide, please. Next, intended data. Just to be clear, we're not intending to collect this data in the annual monitoring statements. That's, HEIF is for our sector data collection. What we're interested in is an understanding of what indicators you plan to use to monitor your own progress. So just refer back to Bridget's point earlier, where she talked about the excellent report from UCI about the pathway to economic growth. So it's really accessible. I'd really encourage you to engage with that, because I think it'll be really particularly helpful for this area of the accountability statement, because I lost a bit, because it will help you kind of make that kind of mental image of, economic growth is a really broad area, as Bridget and Reece both mentioned earlier. And this report will just kind of, we hope will help you just kind of make that mental link of how what you do can be shown in terms of economic growth. I've lost my track there. I will start again. Well, move on. So back to what this provider in this worked example is doing. This provider is using that's because I've got my pages muddled up. That's why I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm talking to one page and you're looking at another one. So here we've got, I don't know, I'm lost. Right, here we've got our intended outcomes. Everything I said about the UCI report still counts. It's really important. And also the BC Business and Commercialisation Supplement. We want to understand where BNC Business Commercialisation Supplement is being involved in activity. So there's a simple element here. In this worked example, they're using half their supplement to expand this HEIF area of activity. So they simply stated that. Right, I'm back on track. Apologies for that. Next one, yes, here we are looking at intended data. I said before, we're not collecting it. In this example, this provider is chosen to use a range of established national data sources from HEIF alongside local interaction tracking, because that is most relevant to what they are seeking to monitor and the outputs they are hoping to achieve. We encourage you to try new data sources, and these could be an exploratory way that you haven't used before, but as long as you've already kind of got some kind of monitoring based on existing established data points, that would be fine. Finally, EDI considerations. This is an optional field in this area. So if your earlier statement that was at an institutional level has completely covered everything, and there's nothing specific additional for this activity, you can leave that blank. But as is in the case here, there is specific information that relates to this activity, then please provide brief details. So in our worked example, this provider has got one of their outcomes shown on the previous slide, was that they want to promote inclusive pathways for underrepresented groups. So this university has undertaken EDI activities and developed a feeder program to help achieve that. That's everything for that worked example. Now on to our second one, where we're trying to look at a different type of institution and type of activity. So this is an art specialist university, and this is kind of a medium area of activity strategic importance to them. They are a smaller organisation with a relatively smaller area allocation of HEIF. So we're not expecting to see the same level of detail that we saw in the previous example. So again, we're starting with the strategic objective for KE. This provider is looking to strengthen the creative economy and foster innovation in arts and cultural sector. And they are planning to do that primarily through a 2-day festival with associated year-round program of engagement that particularly will involve partnerships with a wide range of partners. And they've also set out that HEIF will support staff resource and what that will be. Next slide, please. I realise I'm rushing through these because we're very tight on time. We just want to give you time for questions. Again, they will be available for reference. So in this example, one of the intended onto the intended outcomes it impacts. This art specialist, they're looking to contribute to a major UK industry in creative and cultural industries. So there's quite a clear economic growth link there. But they are also emphasising their impact on the local community, and they enhance cultural and sustainability awareness as being an outcome in itself. And, you know, that's a different kind of pathway that they can follow and just as legitimate. In this case, they are not using their business and commercialised supplement at all, so they can just leave it blank. Onto intended data. There's less available established national metrics in this area. So in this university, they're using their existing HEBC data in Table 5 on events, but also other facilities and consultancy data to see if there's any kind of uptick in their from their increased partner engagement. And this is alongside internal the rest of the data sets are internal targets for the levels of participation they're seeking to achieve with a periodic survey as part of their evaluation activities. And finally, EDI considerations. This is largely covered by the institutional level that they provided earlier, but this particular activity has core relevance to that. So they've repeated the information here to give context to their planned activity-specific EDI monitoring that they want to do around the festival engagement. Next, so that's next slide. That is the end of the worked examples. Of the section 3. So section 4, oversight and governance of HEIF. Now this is a long-standing area of insurance that we've sought. So this is essentially the same as previous. So we're looking for assurance that you've got appropriate policies and processes in place to effectively utilise and monitor public funding. And if you are looking for examples of the kind of information we would expect to see here, you can refer to the previously published accountability statement. Finally, finance plan. Again, the format of this has not changed, other than it now includes a separate additional worksheet that relates to the business and commercialisation supplement. This template has already been provided to KE contacts by email and will also be available on the RE data portal alongside the online submission. It mirrors the annual monitoring finance reporting structure. All the categories are the same. The only real difference is that it's not pre-populated with any money or in any way, as obviously we don't know what future allocations will be. So we're looking for you to provide an indicative percentage breakdown of your planned expenditure for each year. Also, you know, it's not populated in any way, so please remember to write your name at the top. There have been no changes to the definitions of categories that are set out, and one of the worksheets in the document provides information about these categorizations and the activities we expect that each encompasses. So this is to provide sector level direction of travel. While we expect you to, broadly follow your plan, if things change and you actually have to pivot and use a bit of HEIF in a different way, just make sure you accurately report it in your annual monitoring. This is not binding. Nearly there. So, next slide, please. Just some overarching notes for completion. Just remember, this is one structure for 50. Please use it in a way that works for you. The word limits the maximum. We expect the minimum information to be there, but try and be concise. If needed, repeat or cross-refer as required. There's a maximum of 25 times you can repeat the one page. On the online submission, you can save and return to a partially completed return anytime, but we've given you the Word document so you can have your internal collaborations and approval processes. You can just copy and paste with rich text formatting into the online form. If you do submit it, try not to submit it until you are sure you're all ready. But if you have submitted it and then you find, oh no, I've missed a bit, something was wrong, something's changed, you can go in and amend it up until the deadline of the 30th. But as soon as you click on that submit, then it will become visible to us, just so you're aware. Finally, just to briefly mention what we will do afterwards once you've submitted. It's kind of a two-stage because we wanted to give you the maximum amount of time to complete it. So by July, we will do kind of initial high-level checks to make sure we can kind of get on with the process of allocations in August, but it will take us a little longer to do a full detailed review of all the information provided. So we'll issue confirmation of approval kind of at the end of that into September. If we have any questions about anything you provided, we will email your KE contact to ask them. And final slide, please. Questions. I hope it wasn't too rushed, and I'm sorry for my little kerfuffle in the middle. I will now hand over to Tamsin, who's going to take us through the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Sasha. No worries. That was a lot of information that you had to read through just there. So well done. Well done to all our speakers. That was a really clear presentation, I think, of the context and the implementation and some of the detail of what's ahead in the new accountability statements. We haven't had many questions, and I'm assuming that's because everyone was concentrating very hard on what was being said to you. But we have got a few in the Q&A, so you'll be able to see those. I will read them out just in case anybody's not able to access the Q&A. But do continue to put questions in now, whilst we've got at least a good 15 minutes if you want to ask a question. So the first question, quite straightforward, I think, and Sasha, you touched on it just at the end. Will the online form be savable and navigable to support accessibility? Will there be guidance provided on its use and who and how it can be accessed?
Yeah, sure. So access to it is controlled by your institution. So we will publish an online link through the Research England data portal. So every institution has two kind of super users attached to that portal, and they are responsible for authorizing access to anyone in their institution. Providing them with a login, and then when they have a login, going, okay, with your login, you can access research information and/or you can access the knowledge exchange information and this data release. When we publish it, we will provide a guidance document to just kind of remind or show you or set out those steps that you need to do. It's less navigable in that there are mandatory questions, so it's quite tricky to bounce through all the questions because you have to put something in before you can flow through, but we have kind of designed it so that you can look at a question and then bounce back to the overview and then click into a question from the overview. So you can technically see something, but the mandatory questions does make it tricky, which is another reason why we provided a replica of it in the Word document so that you can just exactly see it's an exact wording replica of it's only the order that's changed of what we're asking you to fill in. Did I cover all the points? I can't remember. Oh, one, I can see another question, so I'll just bounce on to that about section 3. You can give diagram tables, but you cannot submit diagrams in that section. That's the images are the only thing it won't allow. They are allowable in the institutional level. It's a technical point about storage.
Super, thank you, Sasha. Yes, so we've touched on that. We've got a couple of questions which I'll let you have a think about, just to flag. There's a couple of questions about public engagement activities, so I'll let you have a think about those while we just answer another slightly technical question about the transition period and February 2026 return. There's a simple question for recipients to just indicate if there've been significant changes to previous statements. So that was the up until now, have you made any major changes to what you intended to do? For a new recipient of HEIF funding, i.e. in this academic year, what does this mean for what will be required? Sasha, I can see you just popped your hand up.
Yeah, so this monitoring that we are shortly to issue in the next couple of weeks is monitoring for the 24-25 HEIF allocations. So if you're receiving an allocation for the first time in 25-26, you won't receive that monitoring request. We are, as you'll be aware, because we're in discussions with those providers, you are providing accountability for the 25-26 year in a different way that we're individually managing with those providers.
Super. It's sometimes it's just getting your academic years lined up, isn't it, and thinking about where your accountability lands. Okay, super. So we had a couple of questions about public and community engagement activities, that some concern that they may somehow no longer be eligible, but that is not the interpretation given what you've presented. Are there any particular existing activities that HEIF has funded that you don't think would be eligible under these new frameworks? And my sense is that if you can relate your activity to an outcome that particularly supports those 3 pillars that Ellen set out right at the outset, and industrial strategy, government missions, and the white paper, then it is an eligible activity. But I will let you comment. Rhys, I'll hand over to you to start that conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Tamsin. So, I mean, I think that's a good interpretation. I think our approach has been to specify the types of outcomes and impacts that we want to see, provide the frameworks for you to kind of map that back to how your activities achieve those objectives and can be linked towards delivering those. So as long as there's kind of a justifiable pathway to the types of activities that you're doing and the outcomes are kind of delivering towards the broad definition of growth that we've presented, then we're not kind of specifying that certain activities that were eligible aren't eligible now or anything like that. It's more about kind of thinking it from the outcomes based and backwards. I don't know if anybody else might want to add to that. No, all good.
Okay, right. Questions now coming thick and fast, so it's I'm trying to do my best to keep up with them. Do you want to say anything more about? So there's some questions about the challenges of making some financial predictions given the current climate of financial precarity in some institutions, and I'm guessing that might particularly relate to staffing. Is there anything you want to say on that? I mean, you did say, Sasha, that these are not set in stone. Once you've made your plan to the best of your availability, you can change your plan in future years. So I don't know if who wants to just pick up on that. Rhys, I can come back to you if you want to just touch on that.
Sure. I mean, as you said, there is flexibility. I don't know if Ellen, did you want to pick up on this?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think this summary you gave, Tamsin, is fairly accurate. That we do fully appreciate the challenges at the moment, particularly in setting out plans over a period of we're talking about 5 years, when even year to year at the moment or month to month plans can change quite significantly given the wider sort of financial and economic context. So I think that's where what we are seeking is accountability, that you have plans in place for how you will spend your HEIF allocation based on the sort of quantum that you might expect based on the last few years. And I think that's where, in particular, we seek assurance around the kind of the objectives that you set in relation to delivering those outcomes. We are, in our sort of review process, we review the appropriateness of those outcomes and the way that you've linked those to the intended objectives, and in this case, the government priorities that are set out, rather than reviewing the activities themselves, as we're fully aware that plans on the ground in terms of the specific activities that you may conduct will change over time, and that's particularly where a changing and evolving financial backdrop can be particularly pertinent. So I think we want you to put a lot of thought into your objectives for how you will be tackling that growth mission, and yes, as you said, as the evolving landscape may change and you may wish to make changes to your strategic plans for HEIF in light of that, there are ongoing opportunities within our annual monitoring statement to alert us to those, and then we can discuss if there are any concerns or otherwise in relation to what those changes might be. So I think fully aware of that backdrop, and hopefully it's kind of worked into our processes that allows you to communicate those changes to us. I think there was a question in a similar vein about the fact that we are adjusting the formula kind of midway through that accountability period, and naturally that may lead to, for some institutions, wanting to shift slightly your strategic plans for how you'll use your HEIF in the context of what may look like a slightly different quantum of funding that you'll receive through HEIF, or incentives that we try to implement through that formula. So again, appreciate that may add an element of complexity and a need within your institution to shift your plan slightly. There was an element in practicality in the way that we do need to set new accountability for HEIF, and that the formula this year and at the formula review, we will always take a longer term and more considered approach to, so that will have to take longer and come in slightly later. But we do appreciate that may result in some change, and again, there's flexibility within our accountability and assurance approach for you to be able to alert us to those changes, have discussions about what those may look like as well. So appreciate that it's not a completely lined up system, but this is the kind of most practical and most sort of effective means that hopefully won't produce too much complexity for yourselves.
Fantastic, thank you, Ellen. On a slightly related note, there's a question about the business and commercialisation supplement and whether that will continue at similar levels over 5 years of HEIF accountability plan, which might be important for people to know. I guess that's quite a difficult thing to know at this point in time.
I think, yeah, it's dependent on outcomes of the spending review settlement, and I guess as part of our work in terms of developing the formula, we'll be thinking about kind of how that might be encapsulated into that, I guess, in terms of whether we can streamline the formula in any way. But yeah, difficult. We understand the kind of the uncertainties that are present at the moment, and understand the difficulties around that.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to shoot back to a quick technical or practical question. Sasha, I will go to you for this. Can you just clarify the timetable? And there was a question about word counts in section 3, which I've momentarily lost track of. But can you just do that clarification of the timetable and what's expected when?
Soon we will, we've already issued the content of the accountability statement in the Word version. We will soon be providing the online submission. The deadline for that will be the end of April 2026. We are also in the next couple of weeks going to be issuing our annual monitoring statements, which is the normal timescales we use every year. We issue by the 1st of December and we collect returns in the middle of February. This will be 18th of February 2026. That will include a question about your accountability for this year, 25, 26, which will be, have you changed anything? No, great, move on. Yes, you have changed something. Okay, give us an overview of what you've changed. I can see also a question about timescales for case studies. Yes, we've also included a request for case studies in a policies and priorities document. That deadline isn't till the end of June. We will provide more detailed, the basic, what we are asking for in those case studies we've already provided, but the more detailed submission process will come in the new year. I think we'll be looking for relevant examples from the last year or two, so it's not kind of set in stone, but not really old examples. But if you've got a really great example thinking of something that HEIF supported maybe a year or so ago, but you're just starting to see the impact or outcomes of it now, that will be relevant, but there'll be more information about that at the time.
Fantastic. We're not going to be able to address all these questions, so I just quickly wanted to assure people that we will, the Research England team will take note of all of these questions, and we will find a way to reply to these questions and get in touch with the whole group. We are hosting a discussion webinar on the 24th of November, which everybody who's registered for this event will get an invitation to, and you can share that as well. And we may well bring back answers to these questions to that meeting, and I'm sure it'll generate more. I think the couple of questions that I was just going to pick up on, not specifically, but they fall into a couple of questions about the type of evidence that might be useful. And I sense that you are interested in evidence that you might not know about, but that people submitting these accountability statements feel is useful to make the case for the activities that they want to do. And where there is a specific level of, somebody's mentioned very localized data, for example, if that evidence just doesn't exist, then you're not expecting every single activity to be underpinned with actual kind of data-led evidence. It's just making the best case possible with what is available, I think, is the sense that I'm getting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Oh, go on, Sasha. I can see you've got your hand up.
I was just going to make one small point, which I think is pulled out in the policies and priorities, but I didn't explicitly mention, is that qualitative data is, has a place in this as well. If it doesn't all need to be kind of hard numbers.
Thank you. That's great. And on the EDI, there was a question about EDI and how much detail to go into in that section. And I think it's pulling out EDI initiatives that are specific to knowledge exchange, if I've understood that correctly. And in that respect, it might be useful for people to look back at their Concordat activity, because whilst EDI wasn't specifically a pillar of the Concordat, there was a lot of EDI relevant activity in the Concordat, if you were thinking about working transparently and ethically and just being inclusive in KE activities. So there might be something that you can mine from older Concordat statements there as well. It just struck me with that. But I don't know if there's anything more that you want to say specifically about that EDI section. Anybody? No? Okay. There's clearly some questions about activities that are falling in the future or changes which have just been brought to attention. There's the point that's made about KTPs and their new or tightened eligibility for KTPs. The news that came out last week from Innovate UK, and I guess again this is part and parcel of why you maintain a bit of flexibility in these statements, because if there's one thing we're sure of, it's that we're in uncertain times and things will keep changing. So again, it's doing the projections as best you can at this point with the information that you have and trying to anticipate changes that might come. But I think for me, coming back to those pillars that Ellen talked about as well, Simon.
Just on the KTP, so that was a decision by Innovate UK that's driven by their emerging strategy, which is to focus on businesses more directly. So there was a different rationale aligned to UKRI strategy behind that decision, and that is independent of HEIF decision making. And I think we have to give room for Innovate UK to progress and evolve. And just picking up on the question on KEF as well, that is an unknown at this point. So at this point, we have a HEIF review of the formula to come. So that the team took you through that. That's the second part of the exercise, and we need to have an open mind going into that formula review session. So please don't interpret KEF that way at the moment. Equally, I'm not saying that they will be linked. I'm saying we need the maximum room to explore the formula so we can make the best possible case to government to keep funding HEIF in the future.
Absolutely. And I think if we know anything, it's that Research England will come to its community to help you to make those difficult decisions if difficult decisions are needed made, but to help plan for future changes. That dialogue is well maintained. So I'm sure you will be invited into that conversation. I'm going to have to bring things to a close because it is 1 o'clock and I'm sure everybody has lots to focus on this afternoon. So I want to thank all of our speakers from Research England. Thank you very much for a highly detailed presentation and well done on sticking to the time and allowing plenty of time for questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question specifically. We will look through and make sure that we do get back to cover all of those questions and make sure we've taken everything into account. And if we can't somehow get an answer to you before the 24th of November, that will be the next opportunity to get together and talk about this really important area of work. So everybody will get an email about that webinar and it will be advertised on our website as well. So thank you to Simon, to Ellen, to Bridget, to Reese and to Sasha. And thank you to all for listening so carefully and for your questions. Have a good afternoon.